Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love what you see, everything is for sale. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. And if you're looking to trade or sell a watch, we are always looking to build inventory. One watch or an entire collection, no upper limit on value paid, and we wire cash immediately. Once again, if you wish to sell a watch or an entire collection, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing and quotes. Let's jump straight in. This might be the most interesting watch Omega makes, with the exception of some of the high horology pieces that are handmade. The Aquaterra worldtimer, technically the Seamaster Aquaterra worldtimer, is the most fascinating combination of style and features that you're going to find in the house of BN. Now, throwing it on the wrist, you can see at 43 millimeters, it is a larger Aquaterra and a larger watch. By Seamaster standards. We're not talking planet ocean huge though, so you can see even though my wrist is 16 centimeters, it's an easy watch to wear. I wouldn't wear it on a wrist much smaller than 15 centimeters, but right here it really does wear well. 60-hour power reserve, coaxial escapement, chronometer certified, anti-magnetic silicone hairspring, and of course a 24 time zone world time function with a lovely laser ablated center dial. It really is a very special look, and you can see that vertical teak deck inspired planking. It's a good looking watch, and as you can see, they do replace Paris with Bienne, the home, BLBN, the dual name city of Omega. Now let's take a quick look at the case back, and you can see this is the latest generation of Omega movement. 2 barrels, 60-hour reserve, arabesque Cote de Genève, blackened screws, full balance bridge with a free-sprung index, silicon anti-magnetic, and very, very accurate. It's also all 150 meters water resistant, so while it may beg comparisons to certain Patek Philippe Calatrava world time complications, this is very much a sports watch, and it's fairly well loomed, and I'm going to show you right now. Like I said, this is a watch you can wear full-time. If you need a candidate for a just one watch, this is a great way to go. Now, sticking with Omega, we're going to take a look at something that, frankly, seems to have come into its own in the last 24 to 36 months, a full integrated bracelet sports watch in steel. This is the Omega Constellation Day Date, a lovely Manhattan style with the griffin claw brackets at 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. It's about 38.5 millimeters in diameter. It's a little bit unconventional to measure, but I would call it about 38.5 from roughly 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Now, taking a quick look at the dial, you can see it is a day and it is a date, but it's also beautifully detailed as we have this lovely set of almost Coke bottle wasp-waisted, polished and satinated indices. You can see they have that center curvature that sort of ducks inward and then splays at the edge. It's a really good-looking watch with a good-looking bracelet. You can see it has this lovely countersink between the links, which are fully integrated to the bracelet, and you can see there's an alternating satin and polished pattern. Now, a lot of folks don't like the griffin claw connies because all too often they are 80s sized and perhaps two-tone. Well, this watch is neither. It's a nice contemporary size for a men's dress watch, and you can see internally it is also identical mechanically to the Aquaterra you just saw. So same power reserve, anti-magnetism, shock resistance, styling, and chronometer certification. Just a really good looking piece, and take note, 100 meters water resistant. So this is absolutely a full integrated bracelet steel sports watch with lume and water resistance that you can wear full time. We'll throw it on the wrist, zoom out a little bit. It's a good looking piece and perfectly sized. I will mention that though it's a 38.5, think of it more as a 40 in terms of how it wears, but it is quite thin for a coaxial Omega of the current generation, and it sits low enough to slide underneath the cuff. A really handsome watch, and priced at a fraction of what you'll pay even for the likes of an Antarctique from Chapek or an Overseas from Vacheron. This watch used is priced more comparably to something like a Bell & Ross BR05, so it's that kind of pricing, but with a much higher level of watchmaking internally. Now, if you're not into BR05 pricing, well, let's go upscale. Launched in 2020, this is the latest version of the full white gold Submariner, the successor to 2008's Smurf. This model is a combination of white gold, blue ceramic, and for the first time, blue ceramic with the black lacquer dial. The timepiece is lovely. 619, I should say, LB, Lunette Bleu. The watch has a wonderful 120 click ratchet. Let's hear. A new 70-hour power reserve internally, a better match between end link width and lug width. You can see the lugs have been tapered down because the end link is now 21 millimeters across, and that's been taken out of the lugs, so they're a little bit less severe at the end. You can see this timepiece is in very good condition. It is pre-owned, however, true pre-owned. So you can see there's a little bit of a mark on the lug right there. Small to see, but important to note. And you can see that the timepiece is overall in outstanding condition. A 300-meter dive watch. It's well loomed and easy to adjust. The Oyster clasp pops open. There's a lift lock system. You can see there's a beacon to hook. That latches once, the clamshell the second time, so it's actually double locked. There's 20 millimeters of incremental adjustment in 2 millimeter increments, so you could slide it out over a diving suit or just a thick winter coat or sweater. Put it on the wrist, and the watch is now 41 millimeters. It really doesn't wear that large. I found that in almost every dimension, including end link to end link, the watch is at most 7/10 of a millimeter larger, so it doesn't look larger, it doesn't wear larger. It's just the latest look if you must have the latest thing, and a very sharp looking way to wear gold without necessarily broadcasting that you're wearing gold. White gold, always pretty discreet in that regard. That said, if you want a white metal that's a little bit more durable and perhaps a little bit more affordable, even at the price people are paying for Daytonas right now. This, of course, is the 116500 LN, a model that originally came out in 2016. I had no idea when I was at Basel World that year just what a sensation this watch would become. Are the prices a little bit nutty? Yes, but then again, if you pay the high price, you take delivery immediately, whereas if you pay the dealer price, you may have a couple of years to wait. So our proposition at Watchbox is that you get the watch immediately, and that justifies the price. Agree or disagree, but I've got alternatives if you're not into Rolex, coming up soon. 40 millimeters, easy to wear, only about 12.2 millimeters thick. This has a 72-hour power reserve. That's right, the Sub is 70, this is 72. Technically, Rolex does rate the caliber 4130 2 hours longer. Vertical clutch, column wheel, chronometer certified, anti-magnetic hairspring, though not quite as amagnetic as the silicon in the Omega. This is my favorite of the two. There's the white dial, there's the black dial. The black dial, to me, looks like a larger and more imposing watch because the black of the dial continues almost unbroken into the black of the bezel. It's also a good-looking watch all the way around, wears solid, nicely counterweighted by the clasp and the bracelet if you like to wear your watches loose. There's also a wonderful column wheel feel here. It's a very crisp and very sharp. It's immediate, it's a tactile pleasure to operate, and the vertical clutch system, which I've described many times, but if you are new to vertical clutches, it means your chronograph seconds hand starts without a jump, and you can leave the chronograph running full time if you so choose with no hazard to the watch. Of all the Rolex watches I'm going to show you today, I think this one is most my speed. White gold and 42 millimeters. This is a model that came out 2 years ago, and I think it's the best Yacht-Master ever made. Though it is larger and it is white gold, it's also equipped with a lovely tonal contrast and an ergonomic dream in the form of the Oyster Flex strap bracelet. Now, what's inside this strap bracelet, and that's why I call it a bracelet, is a nickel titanium alloy. The combination of nickel and titanium, extraordinarily flexible, but also explaining why this strap can never be cut and can never tear. Now you have a folding clasp here, and if you look inside, it's a little bit more than the conventional Easy Link system that you'll find in, for example, the Daytona. The Daytona has a 5 millimeter in or out system, whereas inside of the Yacht-Master clasp, you find something a lot more similar in both its scope of adjustment and its incremental adjustment to the Submariner that you just saw. So you get quite a bit of adjustability built in. You get that 70-hour power reserve, ceramic matte and polished bezel insert, bi-directional because it is a yachtsman's bezel. It's designed to count down to the start of a match within a regatta. It's not a diving bezel, though for most purposes that are not life-saving, you can use it to, for example, time 0 to 60 minutes. Let's do a loom shot because this one's particularly attractive. Large indices in Rolex's Chromolite Blue. This is a gorgeous and easy to read watch. And if you're wondering what the Sub might look like at night, you can see the Sub, it is a little bit different. The indices on the Yacht-Master just slightly larger. The hands, for that matter, as well, right down to the Mercedes tri-spoke. Okay, let's stick with upscale, and let's talk about 40.5 millimeters in platinum. The 5960P, which you can see right here, in full black, it is a much more streamlined aesthetic than the watch that originally launched in 2006. This timepiece, of course, the same size, technical specification, annual calendar, power reserve, and a flyback chronograph. It still has the mono counter for hours and minutes at 6 o'clock to maintain the symmetry of the dial, and that little port turns blue at night. It is silver by day. That's there to remind you when you should not use the pusher adjusters to change the annual calendar. Wind it manually if you prefer. It is an automatic sidewinder, and it does have a 55-hour power reserve. You can also see Patek did a wonderful thing with this model, the Dash 15, and it went with a full set of black date discs. It also pared down some of the features that cluttered the original 5960p dial. It is much cleaner, much more open, much less broken, and still just as wearable. You know, the watch features a matching folding clasp. It's easy to wear, fluid and fashionable on the wrist, though with a white metal case and a black dial, you can wear this one a little bit more casually and sporty than you would, for example, on colored gold, for example, or with a silver dial. You can see the diamond between the lugs, a signature of Patek watches since approximately 2000. When they are made of platinum, they feature that top Vesselton diamond brilliant cut. It's a really good looking watch and a handsome form on any wrist. It's not too large as well, so it wears well on a large variety of wrists. And we talked about the vertical clutch with the Daytona, but I think it's important to mention it here. Because this watch does not feature constant seconds, you may want to have a more active live dial and leave the chronograph seconds running, just so you have your center seconds, minutes, and hours. And that's a nice way to keep your watch visibly alive. Just run the chronograph full time. Thanks to the vertical clutch, you can do that without hazard to the movement. And yes, this dial is fully loomed, and you can use it at night with ease. Okay. This model is a collaboration between Bamford Watch Department, Zenith, and Mr. Porter. It is a 50-piece limited edition in blasted and blackened titanium. 37 millimeters. It is the Chronomaster Revival El Primero Edge of Space. The idea is that you have this dial, which is inspired by the 1970s reference 146 HP, which was not actually a Zenith in-house caliber and wasn't even automatic, wasn't an El Primero. The dial is supposed to recall that caliber, but the aesthetic, the combination of the black and the dark blue, is supposed to evoke the edge of space. And you could see that it does quite effectively. That place where the upper atmosphere melds into the edge of the cosmos. And this watch is a tribute to that boundary layer between our world and the others. Now, the timepiece, of course, features an El Primero caliber, 50-hour power reserve, automatic winding, column wheel, lateral clutch, very crisp, 36,000 vibrations per hour, and it is the classical El Primero. You can also see that the watch, though it uses a sapphire crystal, uses a lovely domed and bubble-shaped cambered crystal to look like a vintage plexiglass. And then you can see the case is seamless. It is a backloader. The movement and the dial go in through the back, so there is no seam between the bezel and the case on the top. All media blasted. It's a nice, cool, gray, anti-glare matte aesthetic. And then you have here a combination of leather, and you have rubber on the bottom. And the rubber is a wonderful boundary as it separates the leather from the oil, heat, sweat, and grit of the wrist. You have a matching pin buckle right here and a very wearable overall size and proportion. I think this could be an excellent unisex option. You can see on my wrist, it's a perfect fit, very light in titanium, super handsome, and it is fairly well loomed. So though the aesthetic is dark by day, it's also a very clear watch when the lights go out, and I'll demonstrate that. Glowing like the stars, you can see this is the edge of space. I'm zoomed out quite a bit, but I wanted you to see just how well loomed this watch is. Okay, from FP Journe, I have two fascinating pieces that recall the way we were. These are all 2000s era FP Journe vintage models. And yes, we call models from the first half of the 2000s vintage when they are FP Journe because Montre Journe was only established in 1999. And this watch, which is an Octa Automatique, features a lovely combination of the discontinued 38mm case in rose gold, matte white gold dial, automatic winding. It's a first generation Octa caliber 1300. And you can see it is a brass movement. The caliber 1300, which has a 120-hour chronometric power reserve, but will in fact run for almost 7 days, about 160 hours. It has a guilloche rotor. This is a real rose-lathe cut with a sort of barleycorn pattern. And so it's 22 karat gold, but the bridges are rhodium-plated brass, and that's desirable because from 99 to about mid-2004, Journe movements were made of brass, which by itself is not as valuable as a commodity like the later rose gold is, but because it's rare as a collectible, it's actually more valuable as a collectible. A lot of folks like the discontinued 38mm case size, which was phased out after 2015. It's a good look, and as with manual transmission Ferraris, what was considered to be unfashionable back in the 2000s, the smaller case size, is now today highly regarded and collectible because of scarcity. And this is really the way to own your FP Journe in 38. A nice contrast between the dial and the case, excellent condition, brass movement, and of course a wonderful and emblematic model representing FP Journe's first automatic watch. That said, if we scroll forward, starting to get into the era of bigger cases here, made from 2004 to 2007, 150 pieces, 40 millimeters in platinum. This is the Octa Zodiac. Now, it features a Zodiac calendar outboard, so you have the date, and then you have an index at 12 o'clock that indicates the Zodiac phase. So you can see the months and the Zodiac cycles are overlapping so that it will always represent true. There's a ruthenium coating on the dial itself. This is often mistaken for one of the ruthenium series watches, but those were 5 watches in series of 99. This was a unique series of 150. There was nothing else like this. And you can see on the reverse side, unlike the ruthenium coated brass movement of the ruthenium series, this is a conventional rhodium coat. You can see reference Z, unique to this model. A large case. It has the French hallmarks and the Eleanor maker's mark. From 1983 in his first pocket watch to about mid-2008, FP Journe used a company called Eleanor outside of Paris. Journe, of course, is French, and Paris is where he essentially learned watch restoration and took his first steps into the world of professional watchmaking. So that Eleanor connection continued through mid-2008 when he bought the company and moved it to Geneva and made it his case factory. So having these old double hallmarked French and Swiss Eleanor-made cases, a lovely and evocative old-school Journe, and of course these Octa Zodiac built through 2007 with the brass movement were the very last of the brass movement Journes. The rest of the line was discontinued mid-2004. And this one, I have to say, is on an absolutely gorgeous Parisian-made Jean Rousseau strap with a nubuck suede texture to the alligator leather on both sides and a lovely matte blue finish. Really handsome and a good match for the dial. Okay. Now, I have to say, all things considered, these are always a pleasure. The 5131, 39.5 millimeters, and as you can see, glorious in the boldest of gold, yellow gold. These watches look even larger because of the use of the crown guard structure and the somewhat more massive lugs than the subsequent model. This is a timepiece that features a cloisonné enamel dial as well as an advanced Louis Coutier-style radial world time display. Now, you set your city of reference up at 12 o'clock, and by the way, Patek had the good taste to put the city of origin and the manufacturer's mark on the bezel rather than the dial. All of this is done in-house. You use different color, vitreous glass-based paint, and then you use different weights of it to create gradients in colors. Like you'd see how at the center it's a lot lighter. Well, you can also see that there are shades of green across the landmasses. That's done using thicknesses of the same color. You also have the cloison, or the metal gold wire, used to outline the continents. Those are all shaped by hand, and this is all fired at 800 degrees centigrade up to 20 times. These are highly manual in their construction. One of the reasons why if you order one of these watches, it is an approval piece from the Stern family. So you submit an application and they will either approve or deny the application to receive one of these watches. Well, this one is pre-owned, which means you can take delivery immediately. Your reference city goes at 12 o'clock, and then as you change your reference city, you could see how the watch does all the math for you. In the 24-hour counterclockwise direction chapter ring, it moves as you adjust the time. Now, as you can see, it's also possible to make adjustments that do not change the position of the city. And you can see that the watch allows you to read the hour adjacent to any one of the 24 reference cities, representing the world's 24 principal time zones. On the reverse side, a lovely movement that's been around since 1977. Here in its latest version, you can see this is the Patek Philippe 240 HU, or Universel, micro rotor automatic, Patek Philippe seal, silicone hairspring, Gyromax style free-sprung balance, 48-hour power reserve. And the nice thing about a micro rotor is that it keeps the watch thin, just like a manual, and it doesn't block your view of the case back, unlike a conventional automatic. Everything here is hand-finished and handsome. You can see this is not cheap anglage, perlage, or Côte de Genève, and details down to the screws and the finishing on the train wheels speaks to Patek Philippe's uncompromising standards. But it is a big watch, I'm not going to lie. It looks larger than it is because of the crown guard, but the 5230 and the 5231 are considerably smaller in every regard, and this watch just has more presence if you want a bolder watch or you have a bigger wrist. Here's a model that was made from 2002 to 2006. And I go back and forth between this, the platinum, and the yellow gold 5070. I like them all. I'm not sure which one is the ultimate. Now, the first thing you talk about with these, other than the era of production, remember this one was made from 2002 to 2006. They made about 250 per metal per year. So this one being white gold, you get a sense of how many would have been made over a 4-year production run. Taking a look at the case and the bezel, this is what you always reference to gauge the condition of a 5070. The first thing to dull and diminish when these are excessively refinished is this fluted line along the flank of the lugs, as well as the sharpness at the edge of the bezel. Now you can see here both are beautifully sharp and defined. We prefer to buy watches in excellent condition to offer watches in excellent condition, and that is what you have here. This is a superb example. Refinished perhaps once or never. You can also see that this is old school case construction with the lugs made separately, then inserted into notches in the case, then welded on with evidence of the weld removed by hand to create that sharp break. This is a manually constructed watch inside and out. The dial is a little bit darker silver. It's almost like it has a gray or anthracite undertone. It's not a perfect bright silver, and you can really see the difference here because you can see the outer track of this 5131. This is bright silver, whereas this is a little bit more steely, like Audi Ava Silver or Mercedes AMG Alu Beam. We have white gold hands as well as Arabic numerals, which are applique, you can see, and they have all been blackened to contrast against the dial base, which features a tachymeter outboard and a second scale inboard. Through the reverse side, caliber CH2770, based on the Le Mans 2310, but with many changes. First, you can see Poisson de Genève Geneva hallmark finish. So this is finished to a level that no standard Le Mans is. It's also been upgraded with 5-position adjustment, a free sprung balance, an overcoil hairspring, and the power reserve has been stepped up from 48 hours with the standard Le Mans to 65 in this Patek. The balance is huge, and you can see it's almost the radius of the movement. This is very old school column wheel, lateral clutch, slow beat chronograph construction, which is to say it is gorgeous. You can see the steel components, which are harder to finish than brass. They're finished to the same standard as the bridges and the plates, and you can see that lovely satin finish on the top, and then the mirrored beveling on the edge. There you can really see it on the edge of the steel components. So this is a beautifully finished watch with a broad display case back and a heritage movement that is frankly more exclusive than the subsequent in-house caliber that you would find in, for example, the 5170. So this is a timepiece that wears beautifully on a small wrist, even though when it debuted as a yellow gold watch in 1998, its 42 millimeters was considered huge. Remember, back then, you were almost in Panerai size class with a dress watch from Patek Philippe. It was equally sensational and controversial given its size, but the aesthetic won over almost all of the critics. And today, between the 5170, the 5172, and the 5070, collectors are unanimous. This, in rose, white, platinum, or yellow gold, is the model family to own. It's one of my personal favorite watches, too. Now let's talk about Moser. Actually, 2 times Moser perpetual calendars. Let's say you want to swim with your Moser. Here you go. Funky blue dial, fume fade, 42.8 millimeters in stainless steel, and 120 meters water resistant. This is the 50-piece limited edition H. Moser Cie Pioneer Perpetual Calendar month date. There was a previous 2019 model, also 50 pieces, with a red burgundy dial. This one to me is more distinctly Moser because both the funky blue color and this fume fade thereof speak to the design aesthetic that established the brand as the favorite it is today. Now you can see the case flank is machined and then hand polished to create these handsome coined recesses. The watch has a lovely domed crystal. It's well loomed. There will be a loom shot. And then the dial has that distinctive blue fade from light blue at the center, funky blue, to almost black navy blue at the edge. There is a month, there is a date. The perpetual calendar system was invented for Moser by Andreas Streller, which means there's no time of day when it's dangerous to set, and you could set it in either direction, and you could truly set it in either direction, up to and including the month. Note that there are split date discs here, so an oversized date can be used. The 2 oversized date discs are superimposed so that the watch doesn't have to be twice the size. It is a very clever system, and it doesn't require adjustment in the year 2100 like every other perpetual calendar. Power reserve, rated 7 days. In fact, it's more like 9 before the watch actually stops. You can see the leap year phase indicator is hidden on the case back. You've got an overcoil hairspring, slow beat, solid gold escapement to reduce friction and improve power reserve, golden chaton fixing pivot jewels of the barrels and the drivetrain, fixed by black polished screws. That's a nod to the pocket watch era of Moser watchmaking in the 19th and early 20th century, and it has a lovely, steady 18,000 vibration per hour beat rate with a free-sprung balance, a full balance bridge, and that handmade overcoil that Moser makes in-house. Moser making its movements, yes, but also its small parts, escapement, hairspring, and balance in-house. And this timepiece is a lovely ode to everything that Moser does well, and more wearable than a dress watch, and steel and water resistant. I should also say Moser only makes about 1,500 watches a year, so compare that to about 900 a year for FP Journe, and you get a sense of the scale. They are very close. I've often described Moser for its innovation, its volume, and its sort of disregard for convention as the German Swiss FP Journe. Now, this is actually my favorite Moser model. I prefer the one with the toxic green or the funky blue dial, but a lot of people tell me they like the matte black dial in the DLC black titanium Endeavor perpetual calendar, and that's exactly what we have here. The sportiest version of the Endeavor perpetual calendar. This is two-tone I can really get behind in a men's watch. Rose gold hands and indices on a matte black dial in a case that features a combination of satin black and gloss black, all titanium, 40.8 millimeters with a matching black on black on black dial, case, and movement triple threat. Now you can see it works the same way as the perpetual calendar you just saw, but in a smaller package. And instead of having the aperture display for the month, here the month is indicated by a central index, 12 hours corresponding to 12 months. So you can see December, January, February, March, and now it's pointing to April, indicating April 4th. And again, this is a bi-directional calendar system, so it never needs to go back to the factory to be reset in the year 2100. The movement is basically the same. Though you can see there are some differences as Moser makes it larger for the Pioneer, but the architecture and the technical specifications are the same. It's just been blackened. It is a very cool look, a very sharp watch, and if you don't need to swim or read your watch at night, this would easily be the model I recommend. It wears better on a small wrist, being a 40.8 rather than a 42, and this is altogether my favorite Moser watch. Any DLC black Endeavor perpetual calendar in titanium, I am on board. Let's go back to 2013 and the launch of the second of the celebrated series of legacy machines from MB&F. Now, Max Büsser's basic guiding direction to the design team, led by Eric Giroux on the styling side, was to imagine what a Moser, well, pardon me, they did a Moser collaboration later, that came out this year. This uses Moser's hairsprings, but not Moser's design. So what would a MB&F wristwatch look like in the year 1890? Well, it would look like the Legacy machine, a combination of pocket watch and wristwatch conventions. This one, again, not a Moser collaboration here. This is a collaboration between MB&F, and you can see the names of the masters, Kari Voutilainen for the styling and finishing of the bridge, and Jean-Francois Mojon of Chronode for the mechanical engineering. So it's a combination of those three. The design by Eric Giroux, the engineering by Jean-Francois Mojon, the idea by Max Büsser, and the style and the finish by Kari Voutilainen. Now, the movement, of course, is enormous to operate these twin balance assemblies, and as you could see, twin dueling escapements, you need an enormous reserve of mainspring barrel, which this watch has. 45-hour power reserve, and winding it is almost exactly like winding a Zeitwerk. It's that same enormous, well-indexed pleasure, and a mainspring that really fights back to let you know just how many joules you're building up inside that spring. Both free-sprung. You can see that the balance bridges are enormous and arced, and the extended pinion of the balance staff, or I should say it's not the extended pinion, it's just the staff itself. It's absolutely enormous. As you can see, both are free sprung for durability and a lovely assembly. You can also see they are overcoil hairsprings for even timekeeping and concentric beating in any position. This is a truly special watch. As you can see, white gold, manual wind, lacquer dial, a lovely machined dial base that's been galvanized, anthracite gray black, 44.6 millimeters, and lovely. It wears surprisingly well. For a watch that big, I can wear it. I wouldn't recommend it on a wrist smaller than 15 centimeters circumference, but it works just fine for me. Very comfortable, and it's not going to fit underneath the jacket cuff. But then again, Max doesn't make the kind of watches that you expect to disappear in polite company. This is a watch that asserts itself. And I have to say, with the Kari Voutilainen standard of movement finishing, you get all for which you've paid. This is almost on Grubel 4C level. There's actually beveling inside the inner circumference as well as the spokes of the wheels, and there's sharp interior angles where the spokes meet the inner rim. You can see that the anglage is a mile wide. Interior angles are used on the bridge for the end of the train, and then you can see that there are screw heads that are black polished with chamfered slot and circumference. The Côte de Genève are a mile wide and super luminous, and again, just that beveling is extraordinary. The work on the wheels, again, is second only perhaps to Chronometry, Fernand Berthoud, and Greubel Forsey among volume watchmakers, and I mean by that more than 6 to 12 watches a year. A very special piece with a matching white gold buckle. But I like to give you options, and if you love independence, reasonable case sizes, and rose gold, I'm presenting you with a choice. Given the choice between these two, I'm going with the Horological Brothers of the Netherlands. Now, this, of course, is the 1941 Principia Automatic, launched in late 2018. This was Tim and Bart's first automatic winding watch. A lovely movement. We'll talk about the movement first, then work our way back to the dial, but this is really why you buy a watch like this. Note that the rotor alone has been multiply finished. There's the frosted interior, the polished and relieved name and logo, the mirrored bevel on the edge, and look at those outward points where the two bevels meet. And then you have the satination on a channel that runs around the edge just before the beveling. You could see that same brushed channel that sort of outlines each one of the stainless steel bridges. And yes, the bridges here are all in stainless steel. You can also see they have a traditional mirrored chamfer on their edge. So they're frosted internally, they're satinated on the outward channel that separates the bevel from the frosting, and then you can see that mirrored bevel lighting up like the sun. I'm going to do my best to capture it, but having done finishing work for Audemars Piguet, Renault et Papy, the Grönefeld brothers know how to finish a watch. You can see the solarization on the barrel itself, and then solarization on the center of the rotor with mirrored surround, ceramic bearings used, 56-hour power reserve. Robust. It's not too thin or too delicate. It has a full balance bridge and a free sprung index, and you can see that the actual bridges used for the train have a bell gable shape designed to evoke the roofs of traditional Dutch houses. You can also see that the drivetrain from the barrel, all the pivots are set in golden chaton, a lovely nod, just like the Moser, to the pocket watch era. There's engine turning on the base plate, and all of the wheels have been individually satinated. Now you can see that the Grönefelds use a wonderfully distinctive three-dimensional case. Now all cases are three-dimensional, but not all feature these daring recesses in profile, and the contrast between flares, nips, and tucks. Lovely detailing. As you can see, the knurled and conical crown is anything but a default design. There's a lovely step at the end of the bezel on both sides, and you can see that to good effect here. The bezel is entirely concave in profile, and you can see that there's a compound curve to the side of the case. It actually ducks in and narrows as it approaches the wrist. The dial featuring polished and blackened hands, alpha style, or pardon me, blued fired hands. There are black indices, black on cream lacquer dial base, and as you can see in the sub-seconds, which is slightly sunken, there is an orange 60 to remind you that the Orange Army of the Netherlands is the team behind this watch. Now, it is a very classical look. You can see the font chosen is traditional in the extreme, and the watch does have a radial array of the Roman numerals used, and I happen to find that the best match for the dial. The radial array looks like an old pocket watch, but in a wristwatch of the highest standard and caliber. 39.5 millimeters. It's not too broad from lug to lug. You can see it wears well on a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. So it's both a great option if you like more traditional sizing, and if you're looking for a unisex option, it works on that front too. You can also see that this is a watch that fits underneath the cuff, so it's a dress watch that sits and slips underneath the cuff the way a dress watch should. So, if you see anything you like on this show today, reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com, for purchase and pricing details.